Hi and welcome to my channel, I'm Simon and today I am back with my first reading wrap up of 2022. I know, we're practically in March, we're over 50 odd days into the year and it's here, the first one, but better late than never. So let's get cracking with me telling you all about the books that I read in January. The first of which I did do a reading vlog on, which I'll link down below, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it was actually a book that I started in December and finished on the 1st of January, and that was To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara, which I've read again since. I'm not going to mention in my February wrap-up because that'll probably be in like a week or so. I was a huge fan of A Little Life. I thought the way it looked at the things that men do and don't say to each other was fascinating, all the different ways in which men can love and how they don't talk about that, but also how it looks at the question of survival and why society is insistent that we must survive if we've been through awful things. So yeah, I thought it was fascinating. I know it's a book that polarizes people. Some people think it's trauma porn. I don't. I just think it's incredible. Anyway, I thought this was really good. Even more so actually on a second read when I think I was devouring it with less speed because I was so excited to get to it and just kind of devour it. It's set over 3 different time periods. You're in 1893 in an alternate version of New York in Washington Square, where we meet David, who is having an arranged marriage. Will it be with a husband or wife? We don't know, because in this version of 1893 you can marry whoever you like, which should be paradise, except whilst David is matched with someone who is lovely, he's also fallen in love with someone else. And as we learn, society isn't as all-inclusive and, well, paradisian, is that even a term, as you would think, because there's still horrendous things going on with race. Equality is not a thing. So that's one part of the book. Then we move to 1993 and to the AIDS epidemic, although it's called The Disease in this book, where we meet a group of gay men who, one of their friends is dying, not of the disease, but of something else. It's how they're dealing with that, as well as another David, because the name's David, Charles, Edward. In fact, all of the names I think repeat at different points. But we learn that David is a descendant of Hawaiian royalty. There's a letter from his father that tells his story. And then we move on to 2093, where the world is awash with like pandemic after pandemic. And there have been some really big ones, but the big ones make the one of 2020 seem really minor. And it's how we follow a marriage and the mysteries around that marriage, and also this unnamed, initially ungendered narrator, which I really enjoyed, and the world there. And it's how these books sort of ripple into each other, these 3 books, in a way. I could have easily read actually a full book of the 1893 version. It actually sent me off to read Edith Wharton, which I'll talk about shortly, and a full one of the dystopic. I thought they were incredible. The middle one didn't quite work as well for me, but the other 2 were phenomenal, and I did cry really badly towards the end of the final section, but not throughout. It's not that kind of book. It's not trying to be A Little Life too. I did have the pleasure of interviewing Hanya Yanagihara in Manchester last week and read the book again, and yeah, got even more out of it on a second read. So yeah, very much recommended. But there's a whole vlog on that. I still managed to talk about it for 3 minutes. Now, I have a bit of a superstition around the first book that I read every year, but if my year of reading is reflected by what I read first, I'm going to have a year of reading quirky, bonkers, brilliant fiction, because my first proper read in full of 2022 was Nightbitch by Yoder, and this is about a woman who has a 2-year-old, and she's sort of losing herself and the person that she was, because she's just become a mum, which she loves, but also does want it to define her and doesn't want it to define her all at once. And whilst all this is going on, she starts to think that she's turning into a dog. She thinks she's growing fangs. She thinks she might be growing a tail. Is she hairier than normal? And it's kind of how she deals with that, with a slightly absent husband, whilst being a mum, with all the other mothers around her. And I thought it was just so good. I will say the ending, because she's an artist, it sort of went a bit arty-farty for me, and that would kind of be for me the only weak spot in this book, because it just went in a direction where I was a bit like, did we really need to go that way? Was that what was necessary? But anyway, really enjoyed it, thought it was brilliant, and would definitely read anything else that Yoder reads. And I'm hoping that, like I said, this year, because of that book being my first full read of the year, is one that's going to be a year of quirky, bonkers reading, which the next book did kind of hit those prompts, actually. It was Panty by Sangeeta Bandyopadhyay, and this is translated, I should say, by Aranava Sinha, and it's the first of Tilted Access Press's books. I'm trying to show you the number 1 on the side there, and I'm trying to read them in order this year, because I've got loads of them on the shelves. I've meant to read them for ages. I want to read more translated fiction. Perfect. This is actually more short stories, all told by women in an Indian city. I can't remember which one it is, Kolkata. And we start off with one woman who arrives there. She moves into this flat and she finds another woman's panties, and puts them on, and is suddenly like transported into her body when she's having sex with men. And the book then follows on, jumping to lots of different narrators, sometimes coming back to some again and moving around, but giving you this sort of patchwork tapestry of the women of Kolkata's sort of desires, the situations they find themselves. And there is occasionally this magical realism, like for example the panties that she puts on and then she's transported into another woman's body. But also there's a woman who reads the news, and as the news hurts her brain and her emotions, it starts to scar her skin. So it's just this really unusual concoction of tales. I didn't always understand what was going on, but I kind of didn't mind. And I know that Sangeeta is published, I think, a couple of times by Tilted Access Press, and I'm really looking forward to getting to her writing again. So yeah, that was an interesting read. Now, this book has been described as one of the most depressing books of all time, and I'm not talking about A Little Life again. I'm talking about Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton, which I picked up after having read To Paradise and had that first section that was so evocative of Wharton. It's actually meant to be evocative of Henry James, and at some point Hanya has given me 3 books that she would recommend I read, including Henry James. I'm going to do that as a vlog. My vlogs are on hold at the moment until, did I say that already? Till later on in, next month. Anyway, so Ethan Frome, what's it about? It's about a narrator at the beginning of the book moves to this small town where he sees Ethan Frome and hears how Ethan used to be kind of part of the town but has become a bit of a recluse. And eventually we find out why, and it's all about how after Ethan and his wife marry and he's happy and settled, although circumstances have led him to a life he wasn't expecting, her cousin Matty moves in, and Ethan is very drawn to Matty and vice versa. And it's this sort of really, I'm going to say it, sexy, sensual book where, and it reminded me in some ways of Tracy Chevalier's Girl with a Pearl Earring, because they never really touch or anything, but the tension between them is just there, and it's how that builds and what they do because of that, which is quite shocking and quite horrifying. But actually there's a big moment of drama, which I won't spoil here, and please don't spoil in the comments down below, but if you know, you know, where after the big dramatic moment, actually there's quite a sinister, dark ending, which I just blinking loved. So yeah, I thought it was phenomenal. For such a short book, it packs an absolute wallop, and it reminded me how much I love Edith Wharton's writing. So I'm definitely going to be heading to summer in the summer, and maybe The Age of Innocence at some point. And maybe me and Mum, we did talk about reading some books together, and maybe an Ethan Frome book, maybe an Edith Wharton book could be one. Then we have Sarahland by Sam Cohen, which I have CJ Reads to thank for getting me to read this, because I hadn't heard about it until it was on her channel. This is a short story collection. It says stories on the front right there. I really love this cover. And each one has a Sarah at the heart of it, or sort of a character that comes in at some point, but there's always a Sarah in every story. And I really, really enjoyed these. The first ones, which are kind of around, one's about an awful incident around sexual assault, basically. And the second one is then sort of a woman embracing her sexuality, but in quite a not a usual way, I guess. I found them fascinating, but actually it was some of the other ones. So there's one story about a couple who, a lesbian couple who want to turn into trees so they can be together forever, and we follow that journey. I thought that was stunning. There's a very short, sharp, dystopic book at the end, which I also found really, really powerful. And then she retells a Bible story, which I thought was done brilliantly and plays with gender fascinatingly, which I loved. And that's something that does come up, like sexuality. They're queer stories. That's how I would describe them, like in a really short elevator pitch. Queer stories. And I just loved them all in various different ways, but the story of the lesbians, particularly turning into trees, particularly kind of got me. And also, like I said, the retelling of the Bible story, but then it was also things like there's one story where you can kind of become a different Sarah. So you could be Sarah Jessica Parker, you could be Sarah Michelle Gellar. In fact, Buffy is mentioned in this a few times. And yeah, it's just a really clever, inventive, exciting, queer short story collection. Would recommend. So thank you for the recommendation. CJ Reads. The lovely folk at Costa sent me the 2 books that I hadn't read from their overall winners list, and me and Mum were going to read them together in the film, but we couldn't because she got COVID. I thought I had COVID again. I don't, I've just got a sore throat, I've tested. Yeah, I couldn't because of that. But the one that I got to, because I ended up not being able to get to all of them because of other stuff, was Manjeet Mann's The Crossing. And I thought this was brilliant. It's a YA novel. It's told in verse, and it's about two young adults. We have Natalie, whose mother has recently died. She's living in Dover. They're living on the breadline. It's a difficult time for them. Her father isn't dealing with it well. Her brother's gone off the rails, and she is she's aware of a boy being bullied at her school who is a refugee, and she starts to look into that and decides to do a swim across the channel to raise money for them. And then we're also alternating with Sammy, who is growing up in, I want to get this right, Eritrea, which I hadn't heard about but have Googled about, and blimey. And it's how he is escaping there because, children are being kidnapped and killed or trained to be soldiers. And it's how their stories intertwine and how they kind of, intertwine, that's how I'll put it. I don't want to spoil anything. And what Manjeet Mann does is at the end of each one sort of segment before she switches to another, let me try and find it where it happens, and it'll be one word that kind of links the two. So we'll go from "but leave me the hell alone" and then "alone in thoughts." Now, sometimes that didn't work too well for me. And then the other thing that kind of broke it for me was the fact that there was this kind of constant reference to the fact that Natalie and Sam were just drawn to each other, and it was like they'd met in another life, and that just didn't quite... It was trying to make it fairy tale, and actually what I thought was really powerful about this was how frank and honest and real it was about what's going on in the world. So I did think it was incredible. I definitely would like to read more of Manjeet Mann's writing, but that was the only kind of little thing that sort of broke the spell, ironically, because it got a little bit magical in places. 3 books I read for a work event where I was hosting the Orion 2022 showcase were, firstly, Complicit by Winnie M Li, which is out in June. And this is all about the Me Too movement in movies in America, or in the film industry in America. We meet Sarah, who used to be a producer, and we find out how she got to be a producer after the New York Times contacted her because somebody she worked with is being looked into. Excuse me, but it's being looked into. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting look at that. I will say I found it sometimes quite detached. It's also a real slow burn. It's kind of pitched as a thriller, and actually it does slowly build and build and build and build, and the atmosphere builds and builds as it goes on. But it does look at how complicit we are when we're silent, and that, I think, isn't just in terms of like a Me Too movement. Like, that's just in anything we see where it's something that we see as wrong and we should question it. And this book really made me think about that. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting book. I think it's probably going to be quite big this summer when it comes out. And what I did appreciate about it was that Winnie M Li, sort of, as well as writing about the pitfalls and the darker sides of film and cinema and all those industries, she also really celebrates the power of film and how amazing it is and how wonderful it can be. So I thought that was a deft thing to do. So that was the first book that I read for that event. The second, this is not the finished cover, obviously, is Murder Before Evensong by Reverend Richard Coles. This is the first in, I'm going to get the name wrong now. This is the first in the Canon Clement mystery, where we meet Daniel Clement in his congregation, where he really wants to put toilets in the church where he works, and people are so against it, and things are getting quite fractious in the town, and someone ends up dead. And so Daniel decides to investigate with the help of his sausage dogs, his mother, and his brother. And I just thought the dynamic between all of those were brilliant. I loved the sort of it's a really cozy. It reminded me actually quite a lot of Richard Osman's the Thursday Murder Club. The Thursday Murder Club. I think that's the right title. It really reminded me of sort of, it's in that genre because it's quite snarky and quite funny, but it's also very twisty. It does take a while for the murder to happen, but I think that's also because there's going to be quite a few in the series eventually. But yeah, I was just charmed by it. And if you're looking for a cozy read to read come April, which is when I think it comes out, then that is definitely going to be the book for you. I'll probably talk about it again once I have a finished copy. And the last book I read for that event, not the last book I read in January though, we've still got a fair few to go, was People Person by Candice Carty Williams, which is the follow-up to Queenie. I'm turning it around because that's roughly what it's going to look like ish when it comes out, but more like this. But it's not called Simon, that's my name because they sent me a special edition. Anyway, this is brilliant. This is about 5 half siblings. At first we meet them when their father picks them all up at different points during one day, and we get to know about the relationships that he had with their mothers, and you know, they all get to meet each other and then don't see each other again until Dimple, who is the middle of the siblings, is involved in something quite, well, full-on horrific, all those things, which made my jaw drop in chapter 2, and so I can't really say much more. But it looks at how then she calls on these half-siblings that she doesn't know to help her, and it's kind of about how far would you go to help somebody, and how, like, is blood thicker than water and all those kind of things. But at the same time, it really looks at what it's like to be a young black person in the UK, and there's some stuff around the police in this that I found interesting. There's a next door neighbour called Karen, which is brilliant. There's some really great comedy in here, but also some startling moments where people that I wouldn't expect to have prejudices do, which then also kind of makes you think about prejudice in all sorts of kind of ways. And yeah, I just thought it was absolutely fantastic and so different from Queenie and so not what I was expecting, but that's what makes a really, really exciting author. Then onto another book that I've made a whole video about, so I don't feel like I need to talk about it too much here, but it's The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, and I absolutely loved this. I did a whole video for like 10-12 minutes on the reasons why. It's about Ada at the start, a young girl who is growing up in London. She feels quite out of kilter with the other people around her at school, and she's asked to do a history assignment on finding out about her family, but she can't really because her parents came from Cyprus here. Her mother has died recently and they'd never talked about their family history at all. And then through a fig tree, which her father is burying for the winter, that he brought over as a cutting from Cyprus, we learn all about the family history. We also go into the war in Cyprus and the conflict there between Greek and Turkish, and it's just so beautifully done. There's a stunning additional love story within it. There's a scene with a parrot that just made me cry. There's so much in this book about nature. I did not know we share 50% DNA with trees. I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's so many facts in this. I've got so much love for this book. Go check that video out. I will link it down below because honestly, I'm going to be doing my Women's Prize predictions video on Tuesday. If this isn't on that list, I'm going to kick off, frankly. So there we go. Then, funnily enough, speaking of prizes, I read Toto Among the Murderers by Sally J. Morgan, which won the Portico Prize this year. And this is set in the 1970s in Leeds, and it's about a young woman called Jude who's moved in with some of her friends into quite a rough part of Leeds, where it's where a lot of the prostitutes live. And this is in the time of Fred and Rosemary West, and so there's this kind of dark atmosphere to the novel from the off. But then as we follow Jude as she kind of goes through, she's kind of finding herself over a very short period of time. She's quite lost and trying to sort of find herself. She ends up with lots of people that maybe she shouldn't, and is kind of love possibly closer than she thinks, and I don't want to give too much away, but that I thought was really brilliantly handled. I also loved how northern it was in terms of sometimes I would get really confused at whose house we were in, but that's because like back when I was younger, like in the late 80s, 90s, people would leave their doors open and you would go and wander in and see whoever was just down the road and have a catch up. And I loved how that was done. But like I said, occasionally I was like, hang on a minute, where are we and what's going on? And there is one housemate that I didn't think necessarily needs to be there. But other than that, I thought it was brilliant. And what I thought was particularly powerful was, as it went on, this sort of doom is there in the background, and it builds and builds and builds. And there was a scene towards the end where I was like, oh God, I was so tense. I was like holding on to the seat a little bit with one hand whilst reading with the other. So there we go. And I do find it quite hard to read with one hand sometimes. I don't know about you. Anyway, moving on from that, because that actually sounded slightly like a euphemism and it wasn't meant to. Then we have, not quite penultimately, but almost, Burntcoat by Sarah Hall. And this book is interesting. I saw Mercedes talk about this, and well, hang on, let me explain about the book. It's a book about Edith, who is an artist, and she had a very difficult relationship with her mother, which we look at in this novel. But it's also about how she fell in love at the beginning of a pandemic, not our pandemic, but a different pandemic, and how she fell in love with this man that she meets, who's a waiter at a restaurant that she goes to, and it's this all-consuming passion whilst the world pretty much falls apart. And going back to what Mercedes said, Mercedes really loved the mother-daughter stuff, which I did like in the past, but I found the way she looks at love and grief really, really haunting. My only issue with that bit of the story was the fact that she really, really explicitly writes about their sex life, which I don't have a problem with. We've all had, I've had sex, imagine, but well, most of us have. But I'm just thinking in case there are any, anyway, I'm overthinking that, so let's move swiftly on. But it's very sexually explicit, and I couldn't really understand why, and I felt sometimes it was like a little bit to shock almost, rather than to explain their relationship or any of their characteristics or anything like that. So that kind of didn't quite work for me. And I have to say, the mother-daughter relationship, I thought that was interesting, but I felt that had been done before. And so, yeah, although actually when her mother is ill, that I found really, really interesting. So a real mixed bag for me. I definitely think Sarah Hall can write, but I think, I'm not someone who can be shocked that easily, I don't like to think. But I just found, and I wasn't even shocked by it, but I was just like, this is a bit like sex for sex's sake. And, we don't want that in our real lives, let alone in books, frankly. So that's my thoughts on that one. Penultimately, a book that I thought I was going to absolutely love. And I almost made a video on this because it made me think a lot of things about reading and all sorts, but I think the moment's kind of passed. But I thought that When I Sing Mountains Dance by Irene Sola would have been exactly my cup of tea. How gorgeous is that for a start? And I was sold that it was kind of the history of these mountains in the Pyrenees. There's witches, there's earthworms, there's nature, there's all this kind of stuff. I found it so confusing, I had to DNF it. And I knew that I wasn't fussed about it too much when I accidentally spilt water on it and was a bit like, oh no, rather than, oh my God, what have I done? And that kind of, was a bit of a shame, really. I have to say, I don't think I'm gonna give this away. I think I want to keep it and maybe try it at a different point, maybe in the summer or something. Because there was something I liked, mainly the witchcraft really, that I liked about it. But I think there was almost too many voices and too much going on. And I don't know whether the translation didn't help. I think it's translated from the Catalan by Marifé Leatham. And sometimes I do think one of the things with translated fiction, I say this like I can read in multiple languages. I can't. I can only read and speak English because I'm dreadfully lazy and haven't learned lots of other languages like a lot of brilliant people have. But it just felt a bit... not jolty, well, I guess I do want to say jolty, but just a bit rather than a smooth storytelling. And I don't mean that I can't be challenged by storytelling or I can't be challenged by prose or the way a book is set, but this, I just couldn't get into. It felt a bit impenetrable, that's the right word, which is a shame because I think it's stunning and I wanted to absolutely love it. And I'd said how I wanted to read lots more. After reading Elif Shafak's book, The Island of Missing Trees, I wanted to read a lot more nature books through fiction. And that one just didn't quite do it for me. So there we go. And then last but certainly not least, we have Wahala, which I should say actually, like the wonderful Elif Shafak's book. Oh, 1 second, caller. I bought an imported edition of because I just think this is way better than our edition here in the UK, and I feel the same way about Wahala. Actually, I don't really like the UK edition that much, cover that much, but this I just think is absolutely stunning. You would just want to pull that off the shelves, frankly, wouldn't you? Although somebody did point out to me the other day that you don't really see the cover, do you? Just see the shelves, but still, great spine. So anyway, what's this about? So this is about 3 friends. We have, I don't want to get this wrong, I think it's Ronka, Simi and Boo. Yeah, I was right. I should trust myself more. We have Ron, Kissimmee and Boo, who are a group of 3 friends. They've known each other a long time. They are Nigerian British, and they are just these wonderful, vibrant characters, all in very different parts of their lives. They're going through lots of different things. And then one of them has a friend called Isabel who comes on the scene and joins in the kind of group, and things slowly but surely start to fracture between the 3 friends, and Isabel is kind of at the heart of it. And Wahala means trouble in Nigerian, and that's kind of what Isabel is, and I loved that. It does go absolutely. I saw Lauren of London Books describe the ending as batshit crazy, and it's totally true, but I just thought it was totally brilliant and just pure escapist. But also, actually, no, that's not fair. It is escapist. It's also, I find books about friendship fascinating, and this is one such book because, well, this also, I find friendship fascinating, but also slightly scary because you never really know what other people think about you, and that blows my mind quite a lot because, well, it just does. But this really kind of heightens that, but also shows that the smallest miscommunication can cause all sorts of trouble or wahala. But yeah, I thought it was brilliant, and I loved all of the sort of cultural references, or the food, and yeah, just thought it was really, 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 really good fun. A great book to finish January off with. So there we go. Those are the books that I read in the month of January. I'll be back soon with the books that I read in the month of February. Well, when I say soon, probably not this week. That would be overkill in terms of wrap-ups, but wrap-ups are back. And I have been quite nervous about this one because wrap-ups for the last couple of years have not been my favourite thing to do. But hopefully you enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments down below if you liked it. But also let me know if you've read any of these on your thoughts on them, and we can talk about them in more detail a little bit. That is one thing I do feel with wrap-ups. Because I will give a book only 2 or 3 minutes. I sometimes don't feel like that's enough to really get into the crux of it. But such is life. But we can have chats about them more in the comments down below. As I said, I'm hoping to be back on Tuesday with my Women's Prize predictions video. I need to film it before I get an early sneaky peek, so I need to get cracking with that. I was going to film it today, but the light's pretty much going. But yeah, and then we'll see what else comes up. I'm hoping, well, not I'm not hoping, I've done it, but I'm hoping to bring you a video that I've made with the wonderful Kate from Harris & Harris Books, where she recommended me some treats in her bookshop. That was good fun. And yeah, and I should actually mention that there's a video with her and a video with Hanya Yanagihara going on the Sky Arts Book Club Extra, which I present and host. Link down below always. And yeah, I think that is everything. I hope we're all doing super duper well, and I will speak to you all soon. Oh, I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, I don't know when Reading Vlogs is going to come back because I might have signed up to judge another book prize. So yeah. But there we go. I'm hoping that they'll come back before my birthday, at least, because my birthday's less than a month away, which does mean, oh, this is what I was going to mention, that I have opened a wish list, which lots of you asked me to do around my birthday and around Christmas. And then last but not least, actually, if you got this far, this t-shirt, you might be loving it because I do. I love graveyards. I love books. I love Kayla from Lala and Books. And this is part of her merch that she's doing. And in a video soon, I'll be showing you a new Savage Reads t-shirt that you will be able to get your mitts on if you would like. So that'll be coming at some point, probably next weekend. But until then, it's goodbye from me, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.